A Search in Secret India by Paul Brunton. Chapter 10. Among the Magicians and Holy Men. Space and time, those defiant enemies of man, hurry this pen again. My feet must once more take giant strides on this eastward trek, while my pen sets down a few salient things that are worth a written memorial. It is true that the fakir of a few tricks, the magician of the streets, holds for me, as for everyone else, a natural interest. Yet mine is only a fleeting interest, for he can throw little light on the great mysteries of human life, which are alone worthy of man's deepest thought. Still, his presence is a diversion, and I turn aside on occasions to inquire after him. I want to picture a few of the types who come into the orbit of my wandering, to point my pen at widely differing men. One of them looms up in memory, though he is but an insignificant trickster whom I met at Rajamundry, a quiet town in the northeastern part of Madras Presidency. An aimless stroll takes me through a place where my shoes sink into the soft sand which covers the ground. Eventually, I arrive at a narrow street which leads to a bazaar. As I walk along in the sultry air, old men squat in open doorways, children play amid the dirt, and a stark naked youngster dives out of a house only to disappear again on catching sight of the stranger. In the long, bustling bazaar itself, elderly merchants sit in their little shops and stroke their beards expectantly while I pass. The sellers of food and grain squat beside their open booths, while an army of flies is busy attacking their wares. In course of time, I come to the somewhat gaudy structure of a temple, where a little group of men and women stirs out of the dust at my approach. The leprous, the crippled, and the destitute make their rendezvous near the temples and the stations of most Indian cities, that they may gather alms of the pious and the strangers. Worshippers walk noiselessly into the building, their bare feet treading the dust on the stones. Shall I too wander into that building and watch the ministrations of the priests? I debate the question and decide in the negative. I proceed on my protracted ramble until I observe a youth striding along beside me. He is dressed in a European shirt worn, as is the custom, back to front, and a flowing waistband, while his right arm clasps a bundle of cloth-bound books. When I overtake him, he instinctively turns his head. Our eyes meet, and our acquaintance begins. The exigencies of my profession have taught me to serve the conventions whenever I can, but to dispense with them whenever they stand between one and an objective. I like travel, but usually in an unconventional way. I like travel, but usually in an unconventional way. Hence, my Indian wanderings will hardly be a model for the Cook's tourist or the unbohemian traveler. The youth proves to be a student at a large local college, and he possesses an air of general intelligence which is quite attractive. Moreover, he seems to have a care for the ancient culture of his land, and when I tell him of my interest in the subject, his delight knows no bounds. I discover, too, that he has not yet succumbed to the hysteria for politics, which has attacked most of the young students in the towns through India. India is now in the throes of the long turmoil which Gandhi has aroused into being in his effort to disturb the relations between the white rulers and the brown ruled. Half an hour later, he is guiding me to an open space where a little crowd is gathered in an expectant mood. There is a man in the center who is bawling something at the top of his voice. The youth informs me that this loud declaration consists mainly of a list of wonderful yogic powers which the man claims to possess. The self-proclaimed yogi is powerfully built. He has an elongated head, thick-set shoulders, and an abdomen which has begun to bulge through the piece of cotton cloth wrapped about his loins, which constitutes part of his dress. For the rest, he wears a long, loose white robe. I feel that there is too much bravado about the man, but when he offers to perform the mango tree feat, if sufficient financial inducement is forthcoming, I join with a few others in throwing some coins at his feet. He begins by placing a capacious earthenware pot in front of him, and then proceeds to squat on the ground. The pot is filled with reddish-brown earth. He shows us a little mango stone, and he plants it in the earth. After that, he produces a large cloth out of his traveling bag and spreads it over the pot, his folded knees, and his thighs. For several minutes, we are treated to some mystic incantations, which the yogi chants in a monotonous voice, and then he withdraws the cloth. The first bud of a mango plant peeps its head above the earth. Once again, he covers the pot and his legs and picks up a reed pipe and emits a weird noise, which is presumably to be taken for music. After some more minutes, he takes up the cloth and he shows us that a little plant has grown a few inches higher. This procedure of covering and uncovering with due intervals of pipe music is repeated until a small mango bush has emerged from the earth. It is about 9 or 10 inches tall, hardly a tree, but nevertheless a small yellowish gold mango fruit hangs from the top of the plant. All this tree has sprung from the seed which you saw me bury in the earth, announces the yogi triumphantly. My mental constitution does not permit me to accept this statement too readily. I feel, somehow, that the feat was a piece of mere jugglery. The young man delivers his opinion. Sahib, that man is a yogi. Such men can do wonderful things. But I am not satisfied. Trying to comprehend the mystery, I decide that the man is more likely a member of the masculine and devant, D-E-V-A-N-T, fraternity. Yet how can one be certain about the matter? The yogi closes his bag and continues to crouch on his hams while watching the crowd slowly disperse. An idea comes suddenly. When we are alone, I approach the yogi. I pull out a 5-rupee note, and I say to the student, "Tell him he can have this money if he will show me how the thing is done." The youth obediently translates my request. The man makes a show of refusal, but I catch the gleam of desire in his eyes. Offer him 7 rupees then. Still the crouching man scorns my attempt to negotiate. Very well. Tell him that we bid him farewell. We proceed to walk away, though I purposely take slow steps. Within a few seconds, the yogi shouts and recalls us. If the Sahib will give me 100 rupees, the yogi promises to tell all. No, 7, or he can keep a secret. Come. Once again we move away. Soon there is another shout. We return. The yogi says he will accept the 7 rupees. And the explanation duly comes forth. The man opens his traveling bag and produces the paraphernalia which his mystifying feat has performed. It consists of a mango stone in bud, 3 slips of a mango plant, each longer than the previous one. He compresses the shortest slip into a mussel shell. The plant bends round in this cramping position. The shell is closed and buried in the earth. To produce the first bud, the man has only to dig his fingers into the earth and remove the lid of the shell, and the plant will once more stand erect. The longer slips of plant are hidden within his cotton waist wrap. During the intervals of waiting, chanting, and music making, he raises the cloth cover once or twice to see how the growth is proceeding, without, however, permitting anyone else to do the same. Under cover of these movements, he deftly takes the longer slip from his waistcoat, plants it in the earth, removes the shorter plant, and replaces it in his dress. Thus, the illusion of a growing plant is created. I walk away a little wiser, 'tis true, but I begin to wonder whether my last illusions about these yogis will fall from me like bronze leaves off the trees in autumn. And then I remember the warning given to me by Brahma, the yogi of the Adya River, that fakirs of a low order and pseudo-yogis give performances in the streets that are nothing but conjuring feats. Such men bring the name of yogi into discredit with the younger people and educated classes, he has informed me. This man who makes mangoes grow in less than half an hour is no real yogi. He is a pretender. A Search in Secret India by Paul Brunton. Chapter 10. Among the Magicians and Holy Men. Nevertheless, the fakirs who practice a true magic do exist. One comes to me during a halt at Berhampur. In this town, where old customs and dusty ways of Hindu life refuse to be dislodged, I have taken temporary quarters in a rest house which possesses a widely roofed veranda. One broiling afternoon, I seek refuge from the stifling heat in the pleasant shade of this veranda. From my long chair, I watch the play of sunshine upon the luxuriant foliage of some tropical plants in the garden. There comes the almost silent patter of naked feet, and a rather wild-looking man, carrying a small bamboo basket, approaches the compound gate. He has long, black, tangled locks, and I notice that his eyes are a little bloodshot. He comes closer, deposits his basket in the dust, and momentarily raises his hands to cover his face as a salute. He addresses me in a mixture of vernacular and faintly recognizable English. I fancy that the vernacular is Telugu, but I am not sure. The accent of his English is so execrable that I am unable to grasp the meaning of more than 3 or 4 words. I retaliate by trying some sentences in English on him, but his command of the language is totally insufficient to enable him to understand me. My command of Telugu, however, is even more insufficient to enable me to understand him. We both discover this fact after we have attempted utterances which are nothing more than long strings of sound to the other. Finally, he attempts to devise a language of gesture and facial expression until I gather that he has something of importance in the basket to show me. I dive into the bungalow and call for the servant, who knows a sprinkling of English, just about enough to sprinkle some intelligibility upon his own vernacular verbosity. I bid him do so that he can translate. He wishes to show you Fakir's magic, master. Excellent. Let him show it then. How much money does he want? He says master can give what he pleases. Go ahead. The fakir's unkempt appearance and unknown origin alternately intrigue and repel me. It's difficult to fathom the expression on this man's countenance. There is something almost sinister about it, yet I do not feel the presence of evil. What I sense around him is an aura of strange forces, unfamiliar powers. He makes no attempt to mount the veranda steps, but he squats down under a banyan tree, whose long rambling branches form a low canopy which trails over his head and sinks to the ground. Out of the bamboo basket he draws forth a venomous-looking scorpion, which he holds by means of a pair of rudely made wooden pincers. The unpleasant-looking insect tries to run away. Immediately, the fakir draws a circle around it in the dust, using his index finger. Thereafter, it continues to run round and round. Each time it reaches the circle, it hesitates, as though confronting some visible barrier, and then goes off in another direction. I watch the thing closely in that hard, brilliant tropical light. After 2 or 3 minutes of this peculiar exhibition, I raise my hand in a gesture of satisfaction, and the fakir replaces the scorpion in his basket, from which he next draws out 2 sharp, thin-pointed iron skewers. He closes his somewhat terrifying, reddened eyes and seems to wait for an appropriate moment to perform the next piece of magic. At length, he opens his optical organs, takes one of the skewers, and puts it into his mouth, point foremost. He forces it through his cheek until most of its length protrudes strangely outside his face. As if not satisfied with this slightly gruesome feat, he repeats it by forcing the second skewer through the other cheek. Mingled sensations of repulsion and wonder flow through me. When he imagines that I have seen enough, he withdraws each of the skewers in turn and proffers a salute. I descend the veranda steps and closely examine his face. Beyond a few insignificant drops of blood and 2 tiny holes in the skin, both wounds are hardly noticeable. The man makes a gesture to bid me occupy my chair again. When I am once more reclining on the veranda, he quietly composes himself for 2 or 3 minutes, as though in further preparation for some striking feat. Calmly, with the detachment with which one might pull a button from a jacket, the fakir's right hand ascends to his eyes, seizes the right eyeball, and gradually pulls it out of its socket. I stand back, astonished. There is a few seconds interval, and he draws the organ a little farther out, so that it hangs loosely on his cheek, suspended by protruding muscles and veins. A feeling of nausea overwhelms me at this ghastly sight. I remain uneasy until he replaces the dislodged eyeball in its socket. I have had enough of his magic, and I reward him with some silver rupees. Half-heartedly he asks the servant to inquire if the man is willing to explain how... No, let me start the sentence again. Half-heartedly I ask the servant to inquire if the man is willing to explain how he performs these anatomical horrors. Promise no tell, master. Father teach son only family know. His unwillingness does not disturb me after all. It's a matter more for the investigation of surgeons and doctors than for errant writers. The fakir covers his face with his hands in a parting salute, retreats through the gates of the compound, and soon disappears down the dusty road. A Search in Secret India by Paul Brunton, Chapter 10. The quiet ripple of the waves at Puri comes to my ears. It is pleasant to catch the tang of a faint breeze which blows in from the Bay of Bengal. I walk upon a deserted part of the shore where yellowish white sands stretch away in a broad expanse, and where one sees the horizon through the hot, shimmering haze which fills the air. The sea is like liquid sapphire. My watch glitters in the glaring sunlight as I draw it out of a pocket. Retracing my steps to the town, I walk right into an inexplicable performance which is destined to provide me with a standing puzzle. I discover a gaudily dressed man surrounded by a mixed crowd. His turban and pajama trousers reveal him as a Mohammedan. I reflect on the anachronism that a Mohammedan should be so prominent in a town which is so pronouncedly Hindu. The man piques my curiosity and arouses my interest. He has a little tame monkey which is quaintly dressed in colored clothes. He puts it through its paces, and each time it unerringly obeys the commands of its master with an intelligence which is almost human. Espying me, the man says something to the creature, which straightway hops through the crowd and accosts me with a plaintive cry. It then removes my hat and holds it out before me, as though begging for bakshish. I throw in a 4-anna piece. The monkey politely bows its little head and makes a sort of curtsy and then returns to its master. Its next performance is to execute an amazing dance in perfect time to the music pressed out on an old accordion by the man. It possesses an artistic grace and exquisite sense of rhythm worthy of a better stage. When the show comes to an end, the man addresses a few words in Urdu to his assistant, a young Mohammedan, who approaches me and asks me to enter a tent which stands at the rear, as his master has something special to show me. While the youth remains outside to keep back the press of people, I enter the tent with the gaudily dressed man. I discover inside that the structure is really a cloth partition flung around 4 upright posts, and that it is quite roofless. One can see, therefore, almost as well inside it as out. A plain, light wooden table occupies the center. The man opens a linen wrap and takes out several tiny dolls, each about 2 inches high. The heads are made of colored wax and the legs of stiff straw shod with flat iron buttons. The man then places the tiny figures on a table so that each one stands quite erect upon its iron buttons. He then withdraws about a yard from the table and begins to issue commands in Urdu. Within a moment or two, the dolls commence to stir around the table and then to dance. He waves a short wand, much as an orchestra conductor wields his baton, to beat time, and the colored little figures dance away in perfect rhythm with his flourishes. They move all over the table's surface, but carefully avoid falling over the edge. I see this amazing display in full daylight at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Suspecting some trick, I move nearer the table and examine it thoroughly, even moving my arms above the figures and below the table in quest of strands of thread, but I can find nothing untoward. Is the man not a mere conjurer, but a fakir of some kind? He then proceeds to indicate by means of signs and words that I should point out different parts of the table. Yes. Okay. I do so, and on each occasion the dolls mass themselves together and dance in a body towards the precise direction which I indicate. Lastly, he shows me a rupee piece and utters something which I intuitively divine as a request to produce such a coin. I take out one from my pocket and place it on the table. Almost immediately, the silver coin commences to dance across the surface toward the fakir. Then, when it reaches the farther edge of the table, it falls off and rolls over onto his feet, where it suddenly stops. The man picks it up and keeps it, making some courtly salams in acknowledgement. Am I witnessing some remarkable piece of conjuring or a feat of real yogi magic? My doubts must be clearly writing themselves upon my face, for the fakir calls for his young assistant. The latter asks me whether I wish to see more of his master's power. I reply in the affirmative, whereupon he places the old accordion to the fakir He hands the old accordion to the fakir and then requests me to place my ring on the table. I take the ring off my finger and obey. It is the same ring which Brahma, the anchorite of the Adyar River, presented me as a farewell gift. I watch its golden claws in greenish stone, the while the kafir withdraws a few paces away and issues command after command in Urdu. At each word, the ring rises up into the air and falls again. The man makes an appropriate gesture with his right hand synchronously with his commands. His left hand still holds the accordion. Now he begins to play the instrument, and before my astounded gaze, the ring starts to dance upon the table in harmony with the music. The man has not approached it, has not even touched it. I do not know what to make of this remarkable performance. How is it possible to transform so mysteriously a piece of inanimate matter and to make it into an object that responds to verbal commands? When the assistant returns my ring, I examine it closely, but can find no trace of any mark. Once again, the fakir unwraps his cotton package. This time he draws out a rusty, flat iron bar. It's about 2.5 inches long and 1/2 inch in width. He's about to place it on the table when I intervene and request the assistant to let me examine it. They raise no objection, and I carefully scrutinize it. There are no threads attached to it. I return it. I look over the table, but find nothing suspicious. The bar rests on the tabletop. The fakir vigorously rubs the palms of his hands together for about 1 minute. Then he bends his trunk slightly forward and holds his hands a few inches above the iron bar. I watch him attentively. He begins to draw his hands slowly backwards and, still pointing his fingers toward the bar, when my startled eyes see the rusty object follow him. It moves over the tabletop of its own accord, parallel to the fakir's backward movement. The distance between the man's fingers and the bar is about 5 inches. When the hands hover over the table's edge, the bar likewise rests there. Once again, I ask to be allowed to examine it. Permission is readily granted. I pick it up immediately, but find nothing wrong. It is just a scrap of old iron. The fakir repeats the same feat with a small steel-handled knife. I reward him liberally for these unusual displays and then endeavor to obtain some explanation from him. The fakir vouchsafes the information that is usually essential for the object to be made or to contain iron, because iron possesses a peculiar psychic quality. Now, he has so perfected himself in this art that he can perform the same feat with objects made of gold. I seek in my mind for a solution of this secret. Almost at once, it occurs to me that a long, thin hair, looped at one end, could catch the bar in its loop and yet remain practically invisible. And then I remember my dancing ring, the fact that the fakir's both hands were occupied with the accordion, and that he stood several paces away. Neither can the assistant be accused of complicity, for he stood outside the tent during the movement of the dolls. However, in order to test the matter still further, I praise the man as being a clever conjurer and juggler. His brow darkens, and he vehemently denies being one. What are you, then? I press home my enquiry. I am a true fakir, he answers proudly through the assistant, a practicer of the art of... I am unable to catch that last word, which is some Urdu name. I tell him of my interest in these things. Yes, I observe that even before you reach the crowd, he replies disconcertingly, and that's why I invited you to this tent. Indeed. Yes, I do not imagine that I am collecting... Yes, let me start that sentence again. Yes, do not imagine that I am collecting money through greed. It is because I need a certain sum to build a mausoleum for my late master. I have set my heart upon this work, and I shall not rest until it is built. I beg him to tell me a little more about his life. Very reluctantly, he yields to the request. When I was a boy of 13, I was occupied in taking care of a herd of goats for my father. One day there came to our village a lean ascetic whose thinness was almost terrifying. The bones seemed to be sticking up out of his skin. He asked for a night's food and shelter, which was readily given to him by my father, who always treated holy men with respect and regard. However, instead of staying for a single night, his stay extended for more than a year. Such was the liking which our family formed for him, that my father continually pressed him to remain and enjoy our hospitality. He was a wonderful man, and we early discovered that he possessed strange powers. One evening, as we sat at our simple meal of rice and vegetables, he looked at me several times very closely, and I wondered why. The following morning he came to the place where I was tending the goats, and he sat down by my side. "My child," he said, "would you like to become a fakir?" I did not have a very clear idea of what that sort of life was like, but its freedom and strangeness appealed greatly to me. So I told him that I would be glad to become one. He spoke to my parents and said that he would return when I was 3 years older, and then he would take me away with him. Strangely enough, both my parents died during that time, so that when he came, I was free to accompany him. Afterward, we roamed the land, going from village to village, I as his disciple, he as my master. All the marvels which you have seen today are really his, for he taught me how to do them. Is it possible to learn these things easily, I ask? The fakir laughs. Only by many years of hard practice can a man master such things. Somehow, I feel that his story rings true. He seems a pleasant, sincere sort of man. Though I am skeptical by temperament, yet I keep my skepticism on a leash. As I stagger out of the tent, uncertain whether I have lived through an extraordinary dream, the pleasant breeze revives me. I hear it stir a row of graceful coconut trees, which shadow a distant compound. The farther I walk away, the more incredible these feats appear to me. I would like to suspect some trick on the fakir's part, yet I feel that his character is more honest than not. But how can one explain this amazing art of moving material objects without visible contact? I do not understand how anyone can alter natural laws at his mere whim. Perhaps we do not know as much about the nature of things as we think we do. A Search in Secret India by Paul Brunton. Puri is one of the sacred cities in India. Monasteries and temples have found a home here since antiquity. Pilgrims pour into the town during certain years of festival and help to pull the gigantic car of Juggernaut on its 2-mile journey. I take the opportunity to study the holy men who pass through the place, and in the result, have to modify my earlier unfavorable impressions. One wandering holy man who speaks broken but understandable English proves to be quite a fine character when I get into closer acquaintance with him. He is on the right side of 40 and wears a thin necklace of berries around his throat. He tells me that he roams from shrine to shrine upon pilgrimage and from monastery to monastery, wearing only a single robe and begging his food, His ambition is to visit the chief sacred places of the East and South. I help him with a little alms. In return, he shows me a small book printed in Tamil. It is so yellow-stained and weather-worn as to appear nearly a century old. It contains several quaint woodcuts. Slowly and carefully he cuts out 2 of the pictures and presents them to me. My encounter with the literary sadhu, as I name him, is more amusing. It happens one morning when I sit upon the sands reading the rose-scented pages of Omar Khayyam. Khayyam, with an accent acute over the A. The Rubaiyat, I don't know how to pronounce that, I'm sorry, Rubaiyat, is a poem which always fascinates me, but since the day when a young Persian writer initiated me into its deeper meaning, I find a twofold pleasure in drinking the wine of its quatrains. This delight which the poem holds for me accounts perhaps for the fact that I am so absorbed in it as not to notice the figure which walks across the sands towards me. It is only when raising my eyes from the printed pages at last that I see this unexpected visitor squatting on folded legs beside me. He wears a holy yellow man's yellow robe, and on the ground he has placed a walking staff and a small linen bundle. I notice the edges of some of the books peeping out of the latter. "Pardon me, sir," he says, in excellent English as he introduces himself, "but I too am a student of your literature." He begins to untie the knot of his linen bundle. "Please do not be offended, sir. I could not resist talking to you." Offended? Not at all. I smile back at him. "You are a tourist?" "Hardly that. But you have not lived long in our country," he persists. I make a nodding assent. He unrolls the bundles and displays 3 cloth-bound books with worn-looking covers and tattered corners, some paper-wrapped pamphlets, and some writing paper. "Observe, sir, here I have the essays by Lord McCullough. A wonderful literary style, sir, a great intellect. But what a materialist!" So I have stumbled across a budding literary critic, I reflect. This book is A Tale of Two Cities by Mr. Charles Dickens. What sentiment! What tear-bringing pathos, sir! After that, the holy man quickly wraps his treasures together and turns to address me once more. "If it is not too impertinent, may I inquire the title of the book that you are reading, sir?" "I am reading a book by Khayyam." "Mr. Khayyam? I have not heard of him. Is he one of your novelists?" I laugh at the question. "No, a poet." There is an interval of silence. "You are very inquisitive," I remark. "Is it alms that you want?" "I did not come for money, sir," he answers slowly. "What I really want, what I hope for, is that you will present me with a book. I am so fond of reading, you see." "Yes, you shall have a book. When I return to the bungalow, you may accompany me, and I shall find you something slow and early Victorian that will be sure to please you." "My deep gratitude, sir." "Wait a moment. Before I give you the present, I want you to tell me something. What is the 3rd book in your bundle?" "Ah, sir, it is a most uninteresting volume." "Quite possibly, but I would like to know its title." "It is most unworthy of mention, sir." "Do you still want the book I have promised you?" The other man becomes a little panic-stricken. "I do indeed, sir. I must tell you, since you force me. It is called Mammonism and Materialism, a Study of the West, by a Hindu critic. I pretend to look shocked. Oh, so that's the kind of literature you study? It was given to me by a merchant in the town. He excuses himself in a weak, apologetic manner. Let me see it then. I run my fingers over the chapter headings of his tattered volume and read a page here and there. It's written in declamatory style by some Bengali babu and published in Calcutta, probably at its author's expense, on the strength of the 2 degrees tacked on the end of the name, but without the first-hand acquaintance of this subject. The writer luridly pictures Europe and America as a kind of new inferno, full of suffering and gloom and peopled by tortured working classes and sabiric plutocrats engaged in debased pleasures. I return the book without comment. The holy man hastily puts it away and produces one of his pamphlets. This contains a short biography of an Indian saint, but it is printed in Bengali, he informs me. Now tell me, do you agree with the writer of Mamonism? I ask. Just a little, sir, just a little. It is my ambition to travel to the West one day, and then we shall see it for myself. Then I shall see it for myself. And what will you do there? I shall deliver lectures to transform the darkness of people's minds into light. I would like to follow in the footsteps of our great Swami Vivekananda, who gave such captivating orations in the great cities of your lands. Alas, he died so young. What a golden tongue died with him. While you are a strange kind of holy man, I remark. He raises a forefinger to the side of his nose and replies with a sapient air. The supreme playwright has set the stage. What are we but actors who make our entrances and exits, as your world-renowned Shakespeare says? A Search in Secret India by Paul Brunton. Chapter 10. I come now to the realization that India's holy men are an extremely mixed lot. Many are good, inoffensive for the most part, even though they seem anemic from the angle of power or wisdom. Others are either failures in worldly life or just men looking for an easy living. One of these men approaches me and begs for bakshish. His matted hair, ash-smeared body, and rascally face give a repulsive appearance. I decide to resist his importunities, if only to study the result. Resistance merely increases his persistence, when finally he decides a new tack by offering to sell me his bead rosary, to which dirty-looking object he attaches reverential importance, if I am to judge by the exorbitant price he demands. I bid him be gone. Less common are those foolish ascetics who publicly display their efforts at self-torture. The man who holds an arm aloft in the air until his nails are half a yard long may be matched by the man who stands on one leg, for years. What either hopes to gain from these unattractive exhibitions, aside from the few annas he may collect in the begging bowl which rests at his side, is not easy to determine. A few seem to practice a sinister sorcery quite openly. They are the voodoo men of India and work mainly in the villages. For a small fee, they will injure your enemy, dispose of an unfavored wife, or clear the path of your ambition by striking your rival down with mysterious sickness. One hears dark and astonishing tales concerning these black magicians, yet they too rejoice in the name of yogi or fakir. Remains a cultured remnant of holy men who condemn themselves to long years of distracted search, to periods of painful self-denial, and to ostracism from the conventional world of organized society, because they have gone forth in search of truth. They possess an instinct which plainly says, whether rightly or wrongly, that to attach truth is to attain to lasting happiness. We may question the Indian stereotyped religious and world-renouncing ways of conducting this search, but the urge which sends him forth is less open to question. The average man in the West has no time for such a quest. He possesses a good excuse for accepting the prevailing mood of indifference, because he knows that if he errs, then he errs in company with a whole continent. For his skeptical age treats the search after truth as a trifle, while spending its own energy upon the serious pursuit of what our best moments reveal as trifles. Somehow, it never occurs to us that the few whose lives are spent in the passionate quest of life's real meaning are more likely to form correct opinions on the problems of the passing hour than those who spend their energies upon a dozen different interests and have given barely a single thought to the discovery of truth. A Westerner once came down into the Punjab plains on a mission other than mine, but some folk he encountered there caused him to strike off at an unexpected tangent until he came dangerously near to forgetting his own primal purpose. Alexander the Great was looking for a vaster land than his own to put under his scepter. He came as a soldier, but it seemed that he might finish as a philosopher. I often speculate about the thoughts which ran through Alexander's brain as he drove his chariot homeward across icy mountains and parched deserts. It's not difficult to perceive that the Macedonian king, who fell under the spell of the sages and yogis he encountered and spent days at a time eagerly questioning them and warmly discussing their philosophy, needed only a few more years' sojourn in their midst to startle the West with new departures in policy. To startle the West with new departures in policy. The holy men of today still contain some among their ranks who do much to keep alive what is there of idealism and spirituality in their country. That the undesirables are in the majority is possible. If so, it is the inevitable result of time's degenerating activity, but it need not blind us to the presence of the saving remnant, who shine out all the more. One meets such a bewildering variety that it does not seem advisable to affix a label, either of praise or blame, upon the whole race. I understand the attitude of those hot-headed students of the towns who assure me that the extermination of these parasitic holy men will constitute a great blessing on India. I equally understand those milder spirits who, older in years and residents of quieter towns, inform me that if Indian society can no longer provide for its holy men, then it is doomed. The problem is important to India in other directions, for economic distress is compelling certain revaluations. The holy man fulfills no useful economic function in the country. Swarms of ignorant and untaught persons wander through the villages and attend the periodic religious fairs in certain cities. They become boogeymen to the children and importune beggars to adults. They are a burden to society, for they have nothing to give in return for what they receive. Yet there exist also really noble men who have thrown up good positions or given away their property in order to go forth and find God. Wherever they would go, they endeavor to exalt those with whom they come in contact. If character counts, then their efforts to uplift themselves and others is surely worth a bit of bread or a plate of rice that they receive. One can only say in conclusion that one must strip the spiritual skin off a man, whether he be vain, humbug, or saintly wanderer, if his real worth is to be rightly estimated. A Search in Secret India by Paul Brunton. The black mantilla of night descends upon the ample shoulders of this earth, the while I wander through narrow, overcrowded lanes in old Calcutta. My mind is still haunted by a gruesome sight of the morning. Our train puffs into Howrah station, bearing a ghastly cargo on its cow catcher. The line runs for many miles through a dangerous jungle where princely panthers roam freely. During the night, our engine hits a beast, kills it instantly, and carries the broken body into the station. The panther's torn, jagged flesh is not easily dislodged from the iron frame. But in the onward rushing train, I have picked up another thread of guidance in this quest. Like most mainline trains in India, it is packed to the point of fullness. The compartment in which I have been fortunate enough to find a berth, for all trains carrying sleeping berths except in the lowest class, contain a mixed crew. They discuss their affairs so openly that soon one learns who and what they are. There is a venerable son of Islam who is attired in a long black silk coat which is buttoned around his neck. A round black cap, neatly embroidered in gold, rests on his thinly thatched head. White pajama trousers are gathered around his legs, while his shoes provide an artistic finish to his dress, for they are daintily made with red and green threadwork. There is a beetle-browed Marathi from western India, a gold-turbaned Marwari, who, like many members of his race, is a moneylender, and a stout Brahmin lawyer from the south. They are all men of some wealth, for they are attended by personal servants who dart out of their third-class carriages at most stopping places to inquire after their master's welfare. The Mohammedan gives me a single glance, closes his eyes, and drifts off into a vacuous sleep. The Marathi busies himself in conversation with the Marwari. The Brahmin has recently entered the train. He has yet to settle down. I am in one of my talkative moods, but there is no one to whom I can talk. The invisible barrier between West and East seems to divide me from all the others. I feel cheered, therefore, when the rebunkant Brahmin pulls out a book whose English title, The Life of Ramakrishna, I cannot help seeing, so boldly is printed upon the cover. I seize the bait and bring him into conversation. Has not someone once told me that Ramakrishna was the last of the rishis, those spiritual supermen? Upon this point I engage my fellow traveler, and he is eager to respond. We ascend the heights of philosophical discussion and descend into talk of the homier aspects of Indian life. Whenever he mentions the name of the rishi, his voice fills with love and awe, and his eyes light up. The reality of his devotion to his long-past man is indubitable. Within 2 hours, I learn that the Brahmin has a master who is one of the 2 or 3 surviving disciples of the great Ramakrishna himself. The master of his is nearly 80 years old and lives not in some lonely retreat, but in the heart of Calcutta's Indian quarter. Of course, I beg for the address, and it is given freely. You will need no introduction other than your own desire to see him, says the lawyer. So, I am now in Calcutta myself, searching for the house of the Master Mahasaya, the aged disciple of Ramakrishna. Passing through the open courtyard which adjoins the street, I reach a steep flight of steps leading into a large rambling old house. I climb up a dark stairway and pass through a low door onto the top story. I find myself in a small room which opens out onto the flat terraced roof of the house. 2 of its walls are lined with low divans. Save for the lamp and a small pile of books and papers, the room is otherwise bare. A young man enters and bids me wait for the coming of his master, who is on the lower floor. 10 minutes pass. I hear the sound of someone stirring from a room on the floor below out into the stairway. Immediately, there is a tingling sensation in my head, and the idea suddenly grips me that this man downstairs has fixed his thoughts upon me. I hear the man's footsteps going up the stairs, when at last, for he moves with extreme slowness, he enters the room. I need no one to announce his name. A venerable patriarch has stepped from the pages of the Bible, and a figure for Mosaic times turned to flesh. This man, with bald head and long white beard and white mustache, grave countenance, and large reflective eyes, this man, whose shoulders are slightly bent with the burden of nearly 80 years of mundane existence, can be none other than the Master Mahasaya. He takes his seat on a divan and then turns his face towards mine. In that grave, sober presence, I realize instantly that there can be no light persiflage, no bandying of wit or humor, no utterance even of the harsh criticism, no, of the harsh cynicism and dark skepticism which overshadow my soul from time to time. His character, with his commingling of perfect faith in God and nobility of conduct, is in his appearance for all to see. He addresses me in perfectly accented English. You are welcome here. He bids me come closer and take my seat on the same divan. He holds my hand for a few moments. I deem it expedient to introduce myself and explain the object of my visit. When I have concluded speaking, he presses my hand again in a kindly manner, and he says, "It is a higher power which has stirred you to come to India, and which is bringing you in contact with the holy men of our land. There is a real purpose behind that, and the future will surely reveal it. Await it patiently. Will you tell me something about your master, Ramakrishna?" "Ah, now you raise a subject about which I love best to talk. It is nearly half a century since he left us, but his blessed memory can never leave us. Always it remains fresh and fragrant in my heart. I was 27 when I met him and was constantly in his society for the last 5 years of his life. The result is that I became a changed man. My whole attitude towards life was reversed. Such was the strange influence of this God-man, Ramakrishna. He threw a spiritual spell upon all who visited him. He literally charmed them, fascinated them. Even materialistic persons who came to scoff became dumb in his presence. But how can such persons feel reverence for spirituality, a quality in which they do not believe? I interposed, slightly puzzled. The corners of Mahasaya's mouth pull up in a half smile, and he answers. 2 persons taste red pepper. One does not know its name. Perhaps he has never seen it before. The other is well acquainted with him and recognizes it immediately. Will it not taste the same to both? Will not both of them have a burning sensation on the tongue? In the same way, ignorance of Ramakrishna's spiritual greatness did not debar materialistic persons from tasting the radiant influence of spirituality which emanated from him. Then he really was a spiritual Superman. Yes, and in my belief, even more than that. Ramakrishna was a simple man, illiterate and uneducated. He was so illiterate that he could not even sign his name, not let alone write a letter. He was humble in appearance, and humbler still in his mode of living, yet he commanded the allegiance of some of the best educated and most cultured men of all time in India. They had to bow before his tremendous spirituality, which was so real that it could be felt. He taught us that pride, riches, wealth, worldly honors, worldly position are trivialities in comparison with that spirituality, are fleeting illusions which deceive men. Ah, those were wonderful days. Often he would pass into trances so palpably divine in nature that we who were gathered around him would feel that he was a god rather than a man. Strangely, too, he possessed the power of inducing a similar state in his disciple by means of a single touch. In this state, they could understand the deep mysteries of God by means of direct perception. But let me tell you how he affected me. I had been educated along Western lines. My head was filled with intellectual pride. I had served in Calcutta colleges as professor of English literature, history, and political economy at different times. Ramakrishna was living in the temple of Dakshineswar, which is only a few miles up the river from Calcutta. There I found him one unforgetful spring day, and I listened to his simple expression of spiritual ideas born from his own experience. I made a feeble attempt to argue with him, but soon became tied-tongue in that sacred presence, whose effect on me was too deep for words. Again and again I visited him, unable to stay away from this poor, humble, but divine person, until Ramakrishna one day humorously remarked, "A peacock was given a dose of opium at 4 o'clock. The next day it appeared again at exactly that hour. It was under the spell of opium and came for another dose. That was true, symbolically speaking. I had never enjoyed such blissful experiences as when I was in the presence of Ramakrishna. So, can you wonder why I came again and again? And so I became one of his group of intimate disciples, as distinguished from merely occasional visitors. One day the master said to me, "I can see from the signs of your eyes, brow, and face that you are a yogi. Do all your work then, but keep your mind on God. Wife, children, father, and mother, live with all and serve them as if they are your own. The tortoise swims about in the waters of the lake, but her mind is fixed to where her eggs are laid on the banks. So, do all the work of the world, but keep the mind on God." And so, after the passing away of your master, when most of the other disciples voluntarily, of our master, and so after the passing away of our master, when most of the other disciples voluntarily renounced the world, adopting the yellow robe, and trained themselves to spread Ramakrishna's message throughout India, I did not give up my profession, but carried on with my work in education. Nevertheless, such was my determination not to be of the world, although I was in it, that on some nights I would retire at dead of night to the open veranda before the Senate House and sleep amongst the homeless beggars of the city who usually collected there to spend the night. This used to make me feel, temporarily at least, that I was a man with no possessions. Ramakrishna has gone, but as you travel through India, you will see something of the social, philanthropic, medical, and educational work being done throughout this country under the inspiration of those early disciples of his, most of whom, alas, have now passed away too. What you will not see so easily is a number of changed hearts and changed lives, primarily due to this wonderful man, for his message has been handed down from disciple to disciple, who have spread it as widely as they could, and I have been privileged to take down many of his sayings in Bengali. The published record has entered almost every household in Bengal, while translations have also gone into other parts of India. So you see how Ramakrishna's influence has spread far beyond the immediate circle of his little group of disciples. Mahasaya finishes his long recital and relapses into silence. As I look at his face anew, I am struck by the non-Hindu color and cast of his face. Again, I am wafted back to the little kingdom in Asia Minor where the children of Israel find a temporary respite from their hard fortunes. I picture Mahasaya among them as a venerable prophet speaking to his people. How noble and dignified the man looks. His goodness, honesty, virtue, piety, and sincerity are transparent. He possesses that self-respect of a man who has lived a long life in utter obedience to the voice of conscience. I wonder what Ramakrishna would say to a man who cannot live by faith alone, who must satisfy reason and intellect. I murmur questioningly. He would tell the man to pray. Prayer is a tremendous force. Ramakrishna himself prayed to God to send him spiritually inclined people. And soon after that, those who later became his disciples or devotees began to appear. But if one has never prayed, what then? Prayer is the last resort. It is the ultimate resource left to man. Prayer will help a man where the intellect may fail. But if someone came to you and said that prayer did not appeal to his temperament, what counsel would you give him? I persist gently. Then let him associate frequently with truly holy men who have had real spiritual experience. Constant contact with them will assist him to bring out his latent spirituality. Higher men turn our minds and wills toward divine objects. Above all, they stimulate an intense longing for the spiritual life. Therefore, the society of such men is very important as the first step, and often it is also the last, as Ramakrishna himself used to say. Thus we discourse of things high and holy, and how man finds no peace save in the eternal good. Throughout the evening, different visitors make their arrival until the modest room is packed with Indians, disciples of the Master Mahasaya. They come nightly and they climb the stairs of this 4-storied house to listen intently to every word uttered by their teacher. And for a while I too join them. Night after night I come, less to hear the pious utterances of Mahasaya than to bask in the spiritual sunshine of his presence. The atmosphere around him is tender and beautiful, gentle and loving. He has found some inner peace, and the radiation of it seems palpable. Often I forget his words, but I cannot forget his benignant personality. Benignant personality. That which drew him again and again to Ramakrishna seems to draw me to Mahasaya also, and I begin to understand how potent must have been the influence of the teacher when the pupil exercises such a fascination upon me. When our last evening comes, I forget the passage of time as I sit happily at his side upon the divan. Hour after hour has flown by. Our talk has had no interlude of silence, but at length it comes. And then the good master takes my hand and leads me out to the terraced roof of his house, where in the vivid moonlight I see a circle array of tall plants growing in pots and tubs. Down below, 1,000 lights gleam from the houses of Calcutta. The moon is full. Mahasaya points up towards its round face and then passes into silent prayer for a brief while. I wait patiently at his side until he finishes. He turns, raises his hand in benediction, and lightly touches my head. I bow humbly before this angelic man, unreligious though I am. After a few more moments of continued silence, he says softly, "My task has almost come to an end. This body has nearly finished what God sent it here to do. Accept my blessing before I go." He has strangely stirred me. I banish the thought of sleep and wander through the streets. When at length I reach a great mosque and I hear the solemn chant, "God is most great," break forth upon the midnight stillness, I reflect that if anyone could free me from the intellectual skepticism to which I cling and attach me to a life of simple faith, it is undoubtedly the Master Mahasaya. A Search in Secret India by Paul Brunton. You have missed him. Perhaps it was destined that you should not meet. Who can tell? The speaker is Dr. Bandyopadhyay, the house surgeon to one of the Calcutta hospitals. He is one of the most skillful surgeons in the city. His hands have performed 6,000 operations. His name possesses a string of degrees trailing after it, and I have derived much pleasure in carefully and critically examining with him some of the knowledge of the yoga of body control which I have picked up. His scientific training in medicine and his expert knowledge of anatomy have proved helpful in my endeavor to lift the subject of yoga to a purely rational plane. I know almost nothing of yoga, he has confessed. What you tell me now is new to me. I have not even met a yogi, that is a real one, save Narasingha Swami, who came to Calcutta not long ago. It is then that I inquire after the latter's whereabouts, only to receive this disappointing answer. Narasingha Swami flashed into Calcutta, created a sensation, and then went off I know not where. I understand that he emerged suddenly out of retirement in the interior before he came here, so he may have returned here. I would like to know what happened. He was the talk of the town for a short time. He was discovered by Dr. Niyogi, who is professor of chemistry at the Presidency College in Calcutta University, a month or two before Madhupur. Dr. Niyogi saw him lick a few drops of poisonous acid and also stuff glowing charcoal into his mouth and keep it there until it stopped glowing. The doctor's interest was aroused, and the yogi was persuaded to come to Calcutta. The university arranged to have a public demonstration of Narasimha Swami's powers before an audience composed exclusively of scientists and medical men. I was among those invited to be present. It was held in the physics theater of the Presidency College. We were a fairly critical lot, and as you know, I have given very little thought to matters of religion, yoga, and such like things because my attention has been centered on professional studies. The yogi stood in the center of the theater, and he was handed poisons, which had been taken from the college laboratory stock. We gave him a bottle of sulfuric acid first. He poured a few drops into his palm and licked them up with his tongue. He was then given strong carbolic acid and licked that up too. We tried him with that deadly poison, potassium cyanide, but he swallowed it without turning a hair. The feat was astounding, unbelievable even, yet we had to accept the evidence of our own eyes. He had taken enough potassium cyanide to kill any other man within 3 minutes at most, yet there he stood smiling and apparently unharmed. After that, a thick glass bottle was broken and the pieces were ground down to a powder. Narasimha Swami swallowed the powder, which can slowly kill. 3 hours after swallowing this strange meal, one of our Calcutta doctors applied a stomach pump to the yogi and the contents of the stomach were taken out. The poisons were still there, and on the following day the powdered glass was discovered in his stool. The thoroughness of our test was beyond dispute. The strength of the sulfuric acid was shown by its destructive effect on a copper coin. Among those present at the demonstration was Sir C.V. Raman, M-A-N-A-N, the famous scientist and the winner of the Nobel Prize, who described the performance as a challenge to modern science. When we asked Narasimha Swami how he was able to take such liberties with his body, he told us that immediately on his return home, he would go into a yoga trance and by intense concentration of the mind, counteract the deadly effect of the poisons. Can you offer any explanation based on your medical knowledge? The doctor shakes his head. No, I can offer none. It completely baffles me. When I return home, I hunt through a trunk for the notebook in which I recorded my conversations with Brahma the yogi of the Adya River. I turn the pages rapidly until I find this note. Quote, poisons cannot harm the adept who has practiced the grand exercise, no matter how violent they be. This exercise is a combination of certain posture, breathing, willpower, and mind concentration exercises. According to our tradition, it confers upon the adept the power of absorbing any object he chooses, even poisons, without being inconvenienced. It is exceedingly difficult practice and must be regularly done if it is to keep its merit. A very old man once told me of a yogi who lived in Benares, who would drink large quantities of poison without being harmed. This yogi's name was Tranquility Swami. He was very well known in our town in those days, but he died many years ago. Tranquility was a great adept who was very learned in the yoga of body control. He sat almost clothesless on the banks of the Ganges for years, but no one could hold converse with him because he had imposed a vow of silence upon himself. End quote. Incredible and impossible, I had deemed this immunity to poison when Brahma had brought the subject within the line of my vision for the first time. But now my preconceived ideas of the limits of what is possible have become a little shaky. Sometimes I have wondered at the unbelievable and almost incomprehensible tasks which these yogis set themselves. Yet, who knows, perhaps they possess secrets which we Westerners are vainly trying to discover through 1,000 laboratory experiments. And that concludes chapter 10. Chapter 11 is called The Wonder Worker of Benares. Till soon.